Hey, Coach, welcome to day one of the Princeton Offense Masterclass. Here we go. All right, we are live. I'm going to pop in the chat here just to make sure that everyone can see and hear. Once coaches start to load up here, let me know in the comments. You guys can see okay. You guys can hear okay. We'll have a quick chat, and then we're going to get going once we can confirm all of that. So if you are watching on there were two links that I sent in your email. One, you can watch straight into the private viewing room, the broadcast room, or two, you can watch this stream live on YouTube. So if you guys can pop in the chat, let me know that you guys can hear, that you guys can see okay. That everything is working. I believe we should be up and running. And let's see, there we go. All right, so as you guys are coming in, let me know where you're coaching, who you're coaching, boys, girls, varsity, JV, freshman, middle school. If we have any collegiate coaches watching. Coach Carker, Phil, how you doing, Coach? Let me know where you guys are coaching, what level, and whether, most importantly, let me know if you are new to the Princeton offense or if you've been running the Princeton offense in the past. If you have been... what's your level of experience with the Princeton offense? Coach Tamayo, how you doing? Tamayo Kawi, how you doing? Jaw Love, all is good? Awesome. All right, so really excited about this. There's a lot of things coming up. So we just finished, it seemed like to me a very long off season. It was a very long summer. I have worked out with probably 7 or 8 different programs, different teams. Really, really excited about that. In the comments, a lot of coaches popping in here. We got about 45, 50 coaches already live with us. Where are you coaching? What level? Boys, girls, varsity, middle school, JV, freshman. Let me know if you are relatively new, if you've been coaching for a while, if you've been running Princeton for a while. Let me know if you are in what stage are you? Are you in a rebuilding stage? Are you now getting competitive? Are your players now learning to win? Are you actually winning consistently every single year, but you're having trouble winning the big game, as they say? Or are you, trying to compete at the championship level? Or are you winning championships? And are you trying to stay on top now that you're on top, trying to stay on top? A lot of teams, I've run into a lot of coaches who have had a lot of success, and then they graduate a group of really good players. Like, man, now we don't have the same talent we used to. We need to find a smarter way to play, and then they start looking up the Princeton offense. So let me know through the comments. I'll kind of scroll through here a little bit and check you guys out. Hey, Tom. Tom's varsity girls basketball, relatively new. Eddie, Hillcrest High School in Illinois. Head girls, no experience. Coach Welch, high school boys, JV. Awesome. Coach Tenchka, how you doing, Coach? In Garden Grove, California. You guys got to find a good reason to bring me back out to California again. So anyway, all right. So guys, keep those comments coming in. I really like this one. It's kind of conversational. I'll be going back and forth to the comments and then going through the slides. I'm not big into just always lecturing. As most players will say about their coaches. Coaches, all they want to do is talk. So we put this master class together to break down the Princeton offense, and I want to do it. We're certainly going to get to a lot of X's and O's and a lot of installation and a lot of stuff that we get to when we do these kind of events. But one thing that I really want to emphasize, and I've been emphasizing all summer when we're actually working with coaches, and I've been to Indiana, I've been to Michigan, I've been to Pennsylvania, I've been to New York, I've worked out with teams in Ohio. And one of the big questions that I'm always asking first is, how do you want to play? What is your strategy? All right, who do you have on your team, and who are you competing against? And I was kind of going through some stuff preparing for this, and I wanted to just read a couple quotes that I really found I really like. And it's kind of been matching up perfectly with what we've been working on with all of these different teams. Is that this is from Sun Tzu, all right, Art of War. Actually, I ran in and I got the book. I've never read the book straight through. And I know there's a lot of different versions of it, but the big quote that I saw that really kind of struck hot with me, it just struck a chord, was, a victorious army first wins, then seeks battle. All right, so they're winning first, and then they go to war. All right, and war is at the absolutely the highest stakes when it comes to a form of battle. All right, and Sun Tzu is saying, all right, win first, then go battle. Okay. George Patton, also military leader, good tactics can save the worst strategy, but bad tactics will destroy the best strategy. All right, and we're going to be talking a lot about strategy because I think one of the things that we glance over, and I was certainly kind of guilty of that too when I became a varsity head coach, is I'm going straight to the X's and O's. I fell in love with the X's and O's, and I skipped right over the strategy part. I never really hammered down, and it wasn't so. We had a strategy of the way we wanted to play, but I didn't have a strategy of how to beat the best teams on our schedule, and that's going to be a theme. So, and then Ian Caldwell, the strong take from the weak, but the smart take from the strong. And I'm kind of curious about the origin of this. Pete Carrill, certainly his book is The Smart Take from the Strong. It's one book I don't have in front of me today. I'll see if I can get it for tomorrow. But if you haven't read that book, that's one that I've gone through a while ago. I'm going to be going through it again. But the smart absolute take from the strong, and that is that's the ultimate goal here. When I look at it, when I read all of these quotes, when I think about how to win, I think that there's two ways to win. This is the way that I look at winning. There's two ways to do it. All right, you can either have, and again, winning at the highest level too, because I think, as we're all trying to build programs to compete at higher levels, we have to beat better teams. But for me, there are two ways to win. One, you can have superior talent with a good enough strategy. All right, or two, you can have a superior strategy with just good enough talent. All right, obviously, if you have players and if you're rebuilding, you're going to struggle to win. We've all been there at one point or another. We might be there now. If you don't play, because all things equal, talent wins. And that's also something that we're going to be talking about as we go through here. But to me, when I look at this, when I get it, I'm trying to make things binary to where it's black or it's white. When we work on the court with players, hey, we want to know if something is open or not open so we can make a quick decision. But when I look at two ways to win, either having superior talent or having a superior strategy, I can develop players, I can develop skills, and I think that's one of the ultimate games that we're in anyway. However, when we look at when I look at the two options, which is easier to come by? Is it easier to come by superior talent, right? Or is it easier to come up with a superior strategy? And I think coming up with the talent is the harder thing, right? Especially high school coaches. We can't recruit, right? We can't, I would say most public schools, you can't go out and recruit. I know there's a lot of coaches doing it. And I know there's a lot of ways that coaches are getting around it. But then again, I've seen coaches recruit players that they coach on their AAU team, on their buddy's AAU team, and their dad's AAU team, and they all come play in one school. Then all those kids graduate, and everyone else quit in the whole program. And I've seen schools. I've seen a high school program locally here to Ohio go to state tournament, state championship over and over for like 3-4 years, and then all of a sudden they don't even have a girls varsity program anymore because everyone quit because they kept recruiting players and bringing in. So, but my belief is that it's easier to develop a strategy and develop our players and compete that way than just banking on having the best players every single year. All right, so that boils down to my core philosophy on competing. So at the end of today, because this is a 3-day event, so we're going to cram as much as we can into 3 days. And as you guys have questions, pop them in the chat. I'm going to pop over back and forth a little bit, or we'll stop and pause and ask questions. So when you guys have them, let me know. Or if I'm not explaining something clearly, let me know in the chat. But by the end of today, we're going to go through this ladder here. And there are steps before we get to the X's and O's that I think are paramount. The X's and O's, it's kind of like the glitter on a bass boat. All right, it's the shiny object. And when I got hired, I wanted to run the Princeton offense. I wanted to run it the same way the Air Force Academy did from 02 to like 06, 07. That's the way I wanted to run it. And when I got that job, I ran it that way. I put everything in the air, or almost everything in the Air Force did over that course of that year. And we ran it the exact same way, the exact same cadence, exact same speed. But I didn't look at it and say, well, how do we need to play generally to compete with the teams that I wanted to beat? I didn't have a plan to beat the teams I wanted to beat. I thought the offense was going to do that. So the first thing and also I ran the offense the way that a college program was running it, with players that they can recruit. And I don't have players. I wasn't able to recruit players at the small school that I was. And again, most of us can't. So I didn't take a good enough look at the players that I had. And coming into being a new head coach, I was also unfamiliar with the league and the schedule that we were playing in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about doing is doing a competitive evaluation. Who are you and who are you competing against? What players do you have, right? And what players are you competing against? All right, so we have an evaluation of, hey, I know what I've got. All right, and then later down the line, we'll get into the X's and O's and what X's and O's match our personnel. But where most coaches, when I was a young coach, I started out coaching when I was 19 years old, right out of high school. The very next year, I pretty much started coaching. And every piece of advice when coaches were talking about offenses, because at that point I was like Jon Snow, I knew nothing about the game overall. All my experience was as a player. And to say you can't run just anything you want to run. You have to run an offense that matches the players you have. If you don't have certain type of players, you can't run certain types of offense. And as I have kind of gone through this now, I first started coaching in 2001, so 23, 24 years ago. Compared to now, I'm like, I think that's a complete myth. I think you can take almost any offensive system and adjust it to the personnel you have. All right. And that's one step of it. The other step of that competitive evaluation are who are the opponents? Who are you competing against? If we don't take that into fact, I think that there's going to be gaps we will not be able to close, because all things equal, talent wins. And if we have a certain level of talent and our opponents have a different level of talent, it doesn't matter what offense or defense we run, right? Because if we try to run the same offense as they're running, say dribble drive or read and react or whatever the popular one out there is, that's not Princeton. If we're running a high ball screen offense and we're running up against another team that runs a high ball screen offense and we're trying to press and deny and they're trying to press and deny, the team that has the more talent is going to win, all things equal. Okay, so we're going to take a look at we're going to do a competitive evaluation of who we are and who we're trying to beat. All right, and then we're going to do a strategy design. All right, we're going to design out the strategy that we need to compete with those opponents who are better than us. And I'll break that down in a little bit. And then we're going to get into the tactical planning. Before we even get into the tactical planning is the X's and O's. But before we actually get into the offense, the X's and O's on the court and all of that and breaking down what's available to us, we're going to approach it as what do we need to do with these? Before we know what they are, what do we need to do with the X's and O's to actually carry out the strategy that's going to help our players compete with our opponents? And that's kind of the step that we're going through. Okay, so hopefully I'm not balling it up. So how many of you are completely new to me? How many of you have not seen me do anything before or very little? Let me know in the chat if this is like your first experience with me. So I'm going to go, and so I know we have a lot of coaches that have been following us for a little bit, but for the coaches that are new, my name is Coach Wheeler, John Wheeler. I started coaching back in 2001, but this is on the very left. This was 2005. This is like my fourth year in, and this is Coach Brenning. He is one of my mentor and my best friend, one of my best friends in the world. So we won, I think, our second straight OCC title that year. I think we won three in a row at one point in time. In the middle picture here, that's with me. That's my son Jackson. He's 7 years old, turns 8 here in less than a month, September 1st. So, and then over here on the right, this is we just did a clinic about a year ago, and we were in Indiana. Just pulled up another picture. We've been out running clinics. So that's me. That's Coach Moore from Indiana that we went out and worked with. Funny story about Coach Moore is he was, I'm small. I'm here from Central Ohio, and he was the men's basketball coach at the Mount Vernon Nazarene College, while I was the head varsity boys basketball coach at a local small high school, about 30 miles apart. So super close. I mean, the college he coached at was about 10 minutes from the house I grew up in. And we never crossed paths during those 4 years that I was there. And then after this, we kind of connected and we've done some things together. So my high school career was 97 to 2000. I didn't start playing until the 7th grade and I got cut. And then every single year after that, 8th grade year, I made the team, sat the bench. 9th grade year, I made JV, sat the bench. Sophomore year, I made varsity. Never played the first 12 games of the year before they started. 10, 12 games later, they started rotating me back and forth between JV and varsity. My junior and senior year, I started every single game. It wasn't until the last 10 games of my senior year where I finally started getting confident and playing like I probably should have been playing, or throughout my career. But I've always had that chip on my shoulder. I've always wanted to prove people wrong that didn't believe in me. So I've had that underdog. All right, I've had that experience, and that's all of that experience is developed pretty much why I coach the way I coach. So I was a practice player at the Ohio State women's basketball team from 2000 to 2003, and at the same time, I started volunteering as a girls varsity assistant. I wanted to get into coaching. I was going to go into youth. I ended up working, finding through a family member, had his daughter's husband got this varsity girls basketball job. That was Coach Brenning in the previous slide. Started coaching with him. I volunteered for 2 years, became the freshman girls coach for a year. Then the JV girls head coach and varsity assistant for 4 years. I also coached JV baseball for 3 years during that stint. And then I became a varsity boys basketball coach, and that was for 4 years. Then I was a varsity assistant for 3 more years at 2 different schools. Went through a brief retirement, had my son, and then for the last 3-4 years, I've been now working with coaches online. So just to kind of take you through that, we do a lot of stuff, a lot of programs and courses and online stuff like you're looking at now. So again, for the coaches who haven't seen anything we've done, we build out courses and programs and all of the 9 that you see everywhere else as well. We've got our version of that specifically with the Princeton offense. That's one of the things that separates what I do from what everyone else says. I've kind of gone all in on this offense. And I tell you what, from in the last 4 years, I've probably learned more about the Princeton offense, and not only more about it. I mean, not even the X's, not even with the X's and O's, but how to run it, how to teach it, how to explain it, how to make it simpler. I've probably learned more in the last 3 to 4 years than I learned in the first 20 years of my coaching career. It's actually working with coaches has made me an extremely, extremely better coach. We've also run coaching clinics and and camps, installation camps we call them, where we would go out and travel and help teams install their offense. And then we also do a couple camps every single year. We're actually working with coaches. The clinics are actually designed to teach the coaches on the court how to run their offense. So that's what we've done. Oh, we found this picture here. I had to pop this in here. This is back in maybe 2003, I think a year before that other picture was taken. And we went to Jeff's son's graduation party 20 years later. This is the first time that the 4 of us, and Coach Blocker was not in that, but this is the first time the 4 of us had actually been in the same room in about 20 years. So that was actually kind of cool. I wanted to share that with you guys. I know coaches that have ever been on a good coaching staff. And I tell you what, if I go back to this, and this is one of the big things that I've run into and learned from working with coaches online, as I've learned that a lot of coaches have not been as fortunate to fall in as good of situation as it can as a young coach. So Coach Brenning had been coaching for 20 plus years before I even started coaching with him. Coach Flory, super disciplinarian, as good a work ethic as anyone. And then Coach Tucker there on the very end in the blue, as creative as anyone. But I was surrounded by excellent mentors in the game. And I don't think a lot of coaches today have had the privilege of falling into a situation like that. It was pure luck that I fell into that situation. And but these coaches here in these pictures really kind of shaped the way that I kind of came up as a young coach as well. So, all right, in the chat. All right, as we get going through here, so now we're going to get into the content here. What is your biggest concern competing this season while using the Princeton offense? So I know we got a lot of coaches that are new with the Princeton. A lot of people have, a lot of coaches are just kind of run a little bit. A lot of coaches here, there are some coaches here that are more experienced, trying to maybe look at it from a different angle, take a little different stab at it. So what are your biggest concerns? Okay, pop those in the chat as we kind of come through here. So there's no experience. So I have a job right now with previous coach at boys in Canada. Okay, we got Canada in the house. Nice. Coach Castro, you saw our last Masterclass on YouTube. Coach McCartney, he's a head girls varsity. You joined before, but I don't know much about Princeton. Okay, awesome. So Coach Lilly is so interested in how to stop this offense. All right. I think we should kick Coach Lilly out of the chat. So no, that's the Princeton offense is, when I was running Princeton as a head coach, and we started running it in about 2002, 2003 was the first time we started running it. And when I was hired as a head coach in 2007, 2008, I was one of the only maybe 2 schools in maybe 100-mile radius, 150-mile radius that was running it pure, like all in on the Princeton offense. Today, there's a lot more programs running it. For example, like also when I was learning the Princeton offense, there were 3 or 4 teams that you could actually find on TV. Today, there's about 30 or 40. I've got a list of about 40 teams, well, on the men's side only that run Princeton. I got about a list of about 25 teams on the women's side that run Princeton only. So how do you guard Princeton? It's becoming a more popular offense. So how do you guard it? That's a great reason to be here. So appreciate you there, Coach. Coach Crawford, you want to use it as a supplement with what you're doing right now. So you're new to it, trying to learn it and add it in as a wrinkle as you use. Okay, there's definitely going to be something for you here. Coach N's looking to see if this is something middle schoolers could run. There is an approach that I would specifically take for middle schoolers. Coach Dar, so having kids know what to do naturally instead of thinking too much. All right, you're gonna day 3, especially for you, Coach, is what you're gonna want to. You're gonna want to see how we install this, how we approach installing this offense, because that's going to answer that question. Coach Scudriff, always willing to learn new options. No worries. You like to tweak and run hybrid sets. I'm huge into hybrid with the Princeton offense. We go over hybrid stuff in our clinics every single year. Coach Glenn, so you ran chin last year, and now you're moving towards point this year. All right, and you want to know what you should key on first. Okay, absolutely. That's something we're definitely going to get into that as well. And we're going to get more into the X's and O's tomorrow. So tomorrow's a big day. I'm going to try to get us out of here in about 90 minutes today, but tomorrow is usually a longer day because we're going to get heavy into the X's and O's tomorrow. Coach Stainer, finding an offense that keeps the ball and players constantly moving. Yeah. And I tell you what, sometimes when you have offenses that, maybe a motion offense where, the ball moves, there's a lot of different things going on. Sometimes you find spots in the offense where the ball gets stuck. All right, Coach Carrill would call, when he went to the NBA with the Sacramento Kings, he really, him and Chris Webber really clicked. And Chris Webber said one of the biggest things he ever learned from Pete Carrill is how to not be a ball stopper. Because when the ball stops, everything stops. So, absolutely. Coach Henniger, so running dribble drive, but mainly want to add some Princeton concepts. We do Princeton and dribble drive. That's one of my favorite hybrid versions. Coach Chivington, so teaching the offense quickly to players coming off football season. Yeah, you want to install it as fast and as efficient as possible. Day 3. We're going to be talking about installation on day 3. All right, and Coach Crawford, again, wanting to preach, you want playmakers, not play runners, kids that can make reads. Absolutely. Awesome. That's also something that's great about Princeton, because what happens when you put in a Princeton-style offense, this is what now this is coming from the perspective of coaches that run this offense with less talent. When you have more talent, it's like, and you have a better strategy, it's like, okay, who wants to play? Right? When you have those talented players and they know how to play together and they can make plays within a structured system, who wants to play? But that's great, though. What happens with this offense and the way that we install it, the way that we run it, is your players, they learn, especially your players who are not playmakers, but they'll learn where the scoring opportunities are coming from. They're going to learn where they're going to score, when they're going to score. They're going to be able to anticipate 2-3 steps ahead. Hey, if this kid goes back door, I'm getting this. If this kid comes and get a handoff, we're looking at this next, and I'm going over here. And you're going to have players, and when you're running this offense with playmakers as well, I had my 4th year as a head coach. We graduated everybody. I had one varsity player returning, and that was it. He was our best player, offensive player, last couple of years. I'm like, this kid's going to hog the ball. He's going to try to take over and do everything on his own. And then what happened was, without me having to coach him on it at all, he would let the offense run, but the ball would always come back to him. And your playmakers are going to learn when they can use the offense, and then they're also going to discover when they can break away from the offense and just go be themselves. But what's great about Princeton, Princeton is kind of to playmakers like what the triangle offense was to Jordan. All right, the triangle offense with Jordan is it made every other player a threat on the court, so they couldn't focus in. They couldn't run the Jordan rules like the Pistons did against Jordan once they got to the 90s. So that's what we're going to be taking away with this. So even if you have I've had a lot of coaches say, we can't run Princeton because we've got players that are too talented. We've got players that are too good at playmakers, so we don't want to bog them down with something like the Princeton offense. So that's awesome. I really appreciate all that feedback. So, all right, so starting out, a competitive evaluation. All right, this is your players versus your opponents. All right, we need to know both. And like I said before, all things equal, talent wins. And if I look at this chart, I kind of put everyone's journey kind of in like 4 categories. You are either rebuilding your program. Your program is now becoming competitive. That means you're winning some, you're losing some. You are either in a winning situation where you're winning more often than you're losing, and then you are at the championship level. That would be the fourth, the highest level. These are kind of the basic ways to kind of break down the different teams that can be on your schedule. All right, and that's the important thing that we're going to look at here. So with everyone being in a different place, right, we're all going to be at different levels. And when you're looking at you know who you have. You know the players you have. You know their strengths or weaknesses. That's where we go to first. When we look at us and we look at our opponents, we're looking at, where are we skill-wise? Where are we talent-wise? And I usually go to where is the best team on our schedule? And how close is that gap? So if you look at this chart, your team's potential is on the left, going vertically north and south. All right, the strategy you need to implement, all right, is going east and west. That's the one going to the right. And if you have talent, all right, talent's going to take you so far, and skill is going to take you so far. And let's say we are at a regularly skilled. Let's say we're at a certain level of skill, and we're having another team that has more talent. Okay, and they're going to be skilled as well. All right, but there's going to be a gap between maybe the skill we have and the talent of the team that we're playing against. All right, and if we just were to say, hey, maybe that team is supposedly better than we are. All right, and there are situations. So like if you take LeBron and you take JJ Redick, right? LeBron's got he's got the best talent. Right, JJ Redick is certainly talented, better than 99.9% of the players on this earth. All right, but Jordan's better than 100% of them. All right, and if all things equal, if we're just playing one-on-one, or if you had 5 LeBrons and 5 JJ Redicks, LeBron's going to win. All right, if you're playing one-on-one, if the rules are constricted to, hey, we're playing one-on-one, get to the basket, LeBron's going to win. All right, now his level of talent is so high. When we the way to kind of frame this is if you were to change the strategy where if JJ Redick were able to somehow force the game into becoming a 3-point shooting contest, right? This is where your level of skill, all right, and a different strategy or a better strategy from your perspective can even things out. Because if you turn the game into a shooting contest, JJ Redick's going to have the edge. All right. Now it's whether or not you can actually do that. In a one-on-one situation, he would never be able to do that one-on-one. In a team concept, can we keep LeBron James on the perimeter and make him shoot threes? And now can we get JJ Redick open in a game where he's only shooting threes? Now we can kind of close that gap a little bit. Now that's just kind of an individual, it's kind of an example. So now that gap can be between whether you're competitive and whether your opponent is at a winning level. If you have superior skill and you are facing teams with superior talent, okay, basically that gap can stay the same, but we're just playing at a higher level. And let's see what I got here. Had to slide on there twice. Okay, if you are have a normal set of skills and you're at a competitive level and you're playing, if there's teams on your schedule that are maybe at a champion level or they have superior talent, that gap gets bigger. Now, the bigger the gap, all right, the more we're going to have to exaggerate the strategy. All right, and the way that we exaggerate that strategy is something that we'll go into in a little bit. But there's all things equal, but there's always a gap. So if you look at this is a picture of Georgetown and Princeton. So that's Alonzo Mourning. This is from the 1989 game where Georgetown and Princeton played, and Princeton lost. I think it was by 2 points. But this is the example where Georgetown has superior talent. And Princeton they're very, I would say they're skilled. They're probably more than I shouldn't say I'm telling you what, the gap in this game being a 16-1, even back in 89, no matter how skilled they were, the talent gap is just too close I'm sorry, it's just too big. It's just too great for them to overcome with the skill alone. So if Princeton were going to come in and run the same offense and the same defense that Georgetown was going to run, Georgetown would win that game by 50. Okay? But if you can play with a superior strategy and I say superior, it rolls off the tongue well, but if you're playing with a better strategy or a different strategy and you can enforce that strategy on your opponent, then you can close that gap. And that's why, a team like Princeton in 89, can come within 1 point of upsetting a team with NBA level talent, and then you have a team with a bunch of what JJ Redick would, well, I shouldn't go use the word plumbers, but a bunch of players that are really skilled, but in any other system they wouldn't even belong on the court with Georgetown. All right. So if you're playing a team with superior talent and you're skilled, but if you up your strategy, if you come up with a better strategy, you can close that gap from here in the same situation. If I'm running the same offense as Georgetown does, the gap's this big. All right. If we can install an offense that's going to let us dictate tempo, dictate pace, dictate possessions, all right, now we can close that gap and make that game close. And that's the overall point we're trying to get here. So this is the UCLA game in 96-97 where Princeton actually upset UCLA, the defending champions, national champions the year before. All right. And they were able to take that same strategy. They run the Princeton offense versus a team that wants to run up and down the court, close the gap, and then anything can happen at the end of the game. All right. So looking at your opponents, I don't know if anyone's seen this on Netflix. So, all right, try to have a little bit of fun with it when we can. So we have a 3-opponent problem. All right, and we're going to try to solve that using the Princeton offense. So the approach to the opponents on our schedule are like so. All right, there's 3 problems to solve. There's 3 different types of teams on our schedule relative to where we are. Relative to who we are. All right, there are teams who you are clearly better than. There are teams that are very similar in talent to you. And then there are teams who are clearly better than you are. And if you want to put a point differential on them, I say, hey, you show up the same night. The teams you're clearly better than, we're looking at 12, 15 points. We're going to win this game. 15, 20 points. This is the game we're going to win. Teams that are very similar in talent, similar in skill, and then teams that are clearly better than you are, more talented, more skilled, more experienced. Okay, there's a bigger gap, right? So in scenario 1, the gap is in our favor. In scenario 2, that gap is very similar. And then scenario 3, that gap is not in our favor. Okay, these are the 3 different problems and the 3 different teams that we have on our schedule. So how do we solve these problems? The teams that we are clearly better than, all right, we have to show up, we have to compete, and we have to respect their game. We have to respect them as opponents. These are the games that we should win 10 out of 10 times. But there's always that one where we take them for granted. We don't show up and compete. We don't play our game. We're not prepared mentally, right? And we get upset, right? There's always games like that. And I'm gonna tell you my strategy for that to never happen again here down the road. The second team, the teams that are very similar to where we are, to win these games, this comes down to our preparation, our discipline on the court, and executing over 4 quarters. All right, and it takes all of that. All right, which team is more prepared? Which team is more disciplined? All right, and which team is going to execute that game plan over 4 quarters? These are the games where you play 3.5 quarters. You have 4 minutes, a bad stretch of 4 minutes, and then you lose this game. All right, and then that's really kind of the difference. I had one of my assistants. He played. His college coach would tell him, he's like, look, when it comes to coaching, if you are within 4 or 5 points in the last 4 minutes of the game, you should win that game every single time because your players should be more prepared, more disciplined, and better able to execute. All right. The teams that are clearly better than we are, in these games, we have to control the strategy, the style of play, and we have to dictate tempo. All right. And the bigger the gap, the more that we're going to have to exaggerate that style of play and exaggerate that tempo. All right. And actually, I've got another book here. And I haven't read through all of this, but if you guys have ever seen this book, this David and Goliath through Malcolm Gladwell. This is a great book, and he actually uses a basketball story in that book about how a team that is less that they were talented, they were athletic, but they were so the level of skill set is like none of them had ever played basketball before. They couldn't run an offense, and all they did was just press and score. But they kind of flipping the other way. Everyone thinks the underdog's got to slow things down. Well, sometimes the underdog's got to speed things up to compete and win. But but that level of exaggeration of play is going to help us compete with teams that are better than us, and that's what Princeton did. In '89, when Princeton played Georgetown, every single time down, it was circle, it was twirl, it was hook. Different plays that we call them, where they would bring the 5-man way up to the volleyball line. They'd throw it to them, and they'd go down, and they'd set screens. And they would do that two or three times every single possession. And they would run back cuts, and they would play 10 feet off the three-point line. But Alonzo Mourning wouldn't go outside the key. He'd just stand at the free throw line. They wouldn't guard him at all. And so Princeton was able to dictate the strategy, but they tried to keep that game as low as scoring as possible. Is the only way they could compete to win that game. All right, so who dictates how you play? All right, the 4 different options. All right, so the decision that we make of how we're going to play, the first one's on us as coaches. All right, you dictate how you're going to play. All right, and that can come down to your history coaching, your mentors, how they taught you how to coach, your personal experiences, your ego. We have all of it, right? My ego was, hey, I'm going to come in. I'm a smart coach. I know what I'm doing. I come in as a varsity head coach. I put in this offense. I put it the same way the Air Force Academy did, but I didn't utilize all of my players the best to my ability because I had an ego that I thought I could do what I wanted to do. I had a preset, hey, I want to come in. I want to run the offense this way. And I did, but I don't think I got the most out of it. And again, I was 25 years old when I was a head coach. So I was also very young and inexperienced, but I also had an ego, right? And that kind of held me back by maybe making the best decision for how we should play. A lot of us choose how we're going to play on our personnel. All right. The one we're just kind of talking about most recently is here, our opponents. All right. Our opponents can dictate how we play. All right. And again, this isn't, we'll talk about on a game by night basis because, we have to set different game plans for different teams. But overall, we need to have one way of playing. We need to have one strategy that we're going to play. And then specific opponents. All right. And for me, the specific opponent that's going to dictate how we're going to play, all right, the strategy that we're going to implement is the best teams on our schedule. All right, they're the best teams on our schedule. Because when we prepare, if we're preparing to beat the teams that we are already better than, we're not going to live up to our potential. If we're preparing to beat and only preparing to beat the teams that we are similar in talent to, similar in skill to, right? Our potential is going to be a little bit higher, but still not as high as it can be. But if we're preparing in ways that we can beat teams who are so much better than us, right? How do we compete in that game? If we can prepare to beat those teams, if we can have something in the toolbox that's going to help us beat those teams, that's going to get us to our highest potential. And again, every coach, or especially the young, enthusiastic ones, our goal every year is to win every single game. And that's a lot of the time very unrealistic, all right? But if you're going to win every single game, and if that's the goal, then you have to prepare to beat teams that are better than you, right? And while that might not be very realistic to win every single game every single year, to strive for that, you have to prepare in a way that you're trying to beat teams who are better than you are, okay? So depending on the gap, right, who's your target? Right, depending on where you are currently, right? And again, there's some teams that are going to be just so far out of reach. And when that's the case, design your strategy with the team just kind of below that. Like, so if you are rebuilding and there's a team that's winning the league every year, that's in the states every year, that's winning districts, winning regionals, winning states, competing at that level, and you're like, that one's going to be a tough one for us. But what is the most realistic team that we could probably beat? All right, that's within 15, 20 points. And we're going to design our strategy around that. Then when we do play that one team where that gap is just so enormous, we're going to come up with the best game plan we possibly can. But our overall strategy, we want the foundation built upon how are we going to beat teams that are 2 notches, 3 notches above us. All right. And then as we build our program, and if you build your program that way with that mindset, eventually there's not going to be a gap too big to overcome, because you're going to be in that competitive winning championship level at some point as you build your program. All right. So our competitive evaluation, strategy design, tactical planning, on-court execution, that's like the very last step in the process. All right. So your strategic design. All right. Before I go here, does anyone have any questions about evaluating your competition, evaluating your team and evaluating your competition and who you're actually going to prepare for? Does anyone have any questions on that? And again, a lot of this is like, it's not the sexy stuff, not the X's and O's are always the sexy stuff, right? That's the glitter. That's the shiny object. All right. And the X's and O's, as we get into strategy, okay, because strategy and the X's and O's are 2 different things. All right. Strategy and tactics are 2 different things. So let's go ahead and move on. If you guys have questions, I'll come back to them. But your strategy, this is the overall style of play. All right. Your offense is not your strategy. This is one of the biggest mistakes we make. Your offense is not your strategy. Your defense is not your strategy. The X's and O's is not the strategy. All right. The strategy is your overall style of play. Strategy is like, all right, what do we have to do to win this game? How do we have to, and not necessarily what, but how do we have to play to be competitive in this game? All right. What's the overall, what's the overall goal, and what do we have to do to accomplish that? Okay. There are 4 strategies that I like to focus on the offensive end. 1, you can play faster than your opponents. Playing fast is a strategy. All right. Running the dribble drive is not a strategy. The dribble drive offense, now, while the dribble drive offense, most coaches look at that as a up-tempo, fast offense, it can and it can't be, or it can and it might not be. When you look at the dribble drive, okay, it's a driving offense. Okay, it's a driving offense. The players that play in those offenses is what makes it a fast, a play fast offense. Okay, same thing with Princeton. Coaches will look at Princeton and say it's a slow down offense. All right, that's the way that Princeton runs the offense. Okay, so the first strategy is you can play faster than your opponents. All right, fast is a strategy. All right, you can play slower than your opponents. And I like to even button it this way. You can play faster than your opponents want to play. You can play faster than your opponents are comfortable playing. You can play slower than your opponents want to play. Slower than your opponents are comfortable playing. All right, you can play more physical than your opponents are comfortable playing. We can make this game, we can compact this game. We can get everyone inside the 3-point line. We can play, when you think about physical, it's like, what do you mean? How do you play physical? Man, we're back in the 80s and 90s when everyone was running their offense with 2 post players, right? That's physical basketball. When you have two post players that are threats all the time, all right? And the 4th strategy we're going to focus on is playing in more space, okay, than your opponents. If we can spread the game out, spread the floor out, that is a strategy, okay? So as I kind of list these through here, can you guys kind of see the difference between strategy and what the offense might be, the X's and O's might be? All right, this is the way that I now think first before I get into the X's and O's. And again, we're just talking Princeton, but any offense. Before you choose the offense, you need to say, hey, how do we need to play to compete at the highest level that we can possibly compete at, for where our talent is and where our opponent's talent is and who we're trying to beat, where our skill level is and where our opponent's skill level, where our experience that we have and the experience that we're going up against. All right. What way on the court do we need to play to be able to compete at that level? I've seen everyone uses to play slower than your opponents. If you're less talented, less athletic, maybe you need to slow the game down. All right. If you are really talented, really athletic, but have a very low level skill on the court, you might need to speed the game up. I mean, how many coaches have coached those kind of teams or those kind of players? Right? Really talented, really athletic, not skilled, can't shoot, don't have great ball handlers. All right. But we can press and we can deny and we can wreak havoc. All right. And we can play faster than what you want to play. All right. If you're more skilled but less athletic, playing slow, okay, these are the typical ways that we look at this. Playing more physical, playing more space. These are the 4 strategies. All right, and you can actually blend the 2. All right, so you can play fast and in space. You can play slow and be physical. All right, those are the ones that kind of pair up the best. All right, so our strategy in a nutshell, we have our overall strategy. And this is, so I'm not going to go deep into this. Just going to touch on it here. Your combined offensive and defensive strategy. Do we want to play, if we're going to play fast on offense, I think we might want to play fast on defense too. All right? Or if we want to play slow on offense, we might want to play slow on defense too. A lot of coaches, some coaches will get these, it's like oil and water mixing. They want a pressure man-to-man defense and then they want to run a slow version of the Princeton offense. Okay? Or maybe they want to run a fast version of the Princeton offense, but they don't design it that way. And then it turns into an offense that's just running lots of cuts and lots of screens, and they're not getting to the scoring actions fast enough. So that their offense and defense are in quagmire a little bit. Okay? Your offense, and think about your offensive strategy in a little bit different way. Your offensive strategy can also be used as a defensive strategy. And when I explain this, I always kind of look at the Peyton Manning, Bill Belichick scenario. All right? And the one game I think it was in the playoffs, might have been into the year, I can't remember. But the Patriots had the basketball. The Patriots had the ball on like their own 20-yard line. And it was fourth down to like 7. Something you would normally punt for. Like 10 out of 10, we're punting this. And they had the lead. They had like a 6-point lead. And Bill Belichick went for it on fourth down, knowing that, hey, there were like less than 2 minutes, like a minute and a half of the game left. He knew, even with that little amount of time, if he were to punt the ball, and if it were to land inside the 20 on the other side of the field, Peyton Manning's going to come down and win the game. He knew it. He knew if we gave the ball back, Peyton Manning was going to win the game, even though that they had a lead. So they went for it on fourth down. And that's how the Patriots would attack the Colts in most of those games. Hey, if we're gonna run the ball, we're gonna get first downs, we're gonna keep Peyton Manning off the field. If we can keep Peyton Manning off the field, he can't score on us. All right, so a lot of teams will use a lot of Princeton teams who are underdogs will use their offense as their best defensive strategy, and then a lot of teams will use their best defense as their offensive strategy. All right, we kind of touch on that a little bit on that last slide. And I went back and looked. I knew this stat, and I couldn't go through and find everything that I wanted. But back when I was first learning this offense was between 2002, 2003 was the year I was first introduced to Princeton. But if you look at from 97 to 98, number one, defensive when it comes to scoring, opponents' points per game, Princeton was number one. All right, 2000, I think that's 2005, 2006. Air Force, number one, Princeton, number two. And then the year after, 06, 07, Princeton, number one, Air Force, number two. All right, and then in 2012, 2013, I threw this one in here because Denver popped in the chat. Denver popped in the top 10. This top 10 in the country, all Division I. And the reason Denver popped in there was because now Joe Scott was now coaching, was at Air Force, went to Princeton, and then went to Denver, and he started doing the same thing at Denver. And the way that they ran their offense, they were able to keep the game as low scoring as they possibly could because they were Air Force, Princeton, Denver, Northwestern. These are all schools that run the Princeton offense in a way that they have to because of the opponents that they're trying to beat. The Princeton cannot recruit the same way a Georgetown and NC State, a Duke, an Ohio State, Michigan State. We can't recruit the same way. We can't recruit the same players because they have academic standards at Ivy League schools. They don't have money. They don't have athletic scholarships that they can give players. So they have to get certain types of players that can qualify and afford to go there, or that can get grants and stuff that can afford to go to an Ivy League school and that can keep their academics up. So they're already at a disadvantage competing wise. So that's why Pete Carril designed the offense the way that he did. Was he didn't make the Princeton offense a slow down offense. As we're kind of moving in, it's like you can run Princeton up tempo. You absolutely can, and we're going to show you steps how to do that. But the reason why it has such a stereotype that it does is because Princeton ran it slow. Air Force ran it slow. Denver ran it slow. Northwestern ran it slow relative to the Big Ten, the big other teams in the Big Ten at the time when Bill Carmody was at Northwestern. It's because of the players they had and the players the players that they had on their team and the players that their opponents had that they were trying to beat. Right? Pete Carroll was trying to win the Ivy League every year with a lot of similar talent going against each other. Guess what? They were better prepared, more disciplined, better at executing on the court, no matter what offense they run. And they won the Ivy League most of the time, a big chunk while he was there. But the teams that he was trying to beat were the teams that they were going to run into when they got to the national tournament. Right? When it came March Madness, they knew, hey, we're not going to play Ivy League teams, and we're going to play Big Ten teams. We're going to play ACC teams. We're going to play Big East teams. And we don't have nearly the talent. So there's the way that we have to play to close that gap. And hopefully a lot of this is kind of starting to run together and click. Okay. Right. So you can also run your offense as an offense. All right. Have you ever seen NC State run the Princeton offense? This is Herb Sendek's final couple years at NC, probably his last maybe 3 years at NC State. I can't remember the years off the top of my head. But Herb Sendek was one of the first coaches to run this. And he's also an outsider. He's also a Princeton offense outsider. So there was an article in the Sports Illustrated, I think it was 2002. I think Jordan's on the cover. I've got a copy of it. Maybe I'll try to pull it up and send that to you guys before this 3 days is over, or maybe later in the week. But Bill Carmody and I think maybe Joe Scott and John Thompson III they were scouting and something, but they came across, they were in the stands or they were watching film, one or the other. They were watching NC State run the Princeton offense. And they're looking at him because the big stigma was you can't get athletes to run this offense. And he's like, but they're running it. And they're doing everything that we're doing. It might not have been NC State. It might have been Samford. I'm trying to remember. But the story goes is like they couldn't believe that they were running it. Have you ever seen Georgetown run the Princeton offense? Mid-2000s, when John Thompson III left Princeton and went to Georgetown. This is when they had some great teams. They had Jeff Green. They had Roy Hibbert. And the way that they ran the Princeton offense, they didn't have to run the whole playbook. But they ran like three things and run it very well. And when I think they went to the Final Four at least once, Elite Eight once, back-to-back years, running Princeton at the men's level. I remember it very, very well because they beat Ohio State one year when they had Greg Oden and that crew. But I did this video breakdown a couple years ago where I broke down that Georgetown team running the Princeton offense against Duke. This was J.J. Redick's senior year. Duke that year, I think it was 07, 08. They were, I think it was 07. Duke was 18-0, number one in the country, and then they played Georgetown. Georgetown ran like three things. They ran point opposite, they ran a little bit of open, and a little bit of low post, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. But they ran it with the backdoor concept because Duke, while Georgetown was the more athletic team, the more talented team. I mean, Duke had J.J. Redick. They had Sheldon. They had such a good team, but they weren't as athletic as Georgetown. But they were still pressuring and denying in an old school Coach K kind of way. And this was the first game I've ever seen Coach K go zone before he started hanging out with the Syracuse guys, all right, and the Olympic guys, and started adding some of that into his game. But the way that Georgetown ran the Princeton offense was absolutely incredible. Georgetown and NC State, I would say these were the two teams, probably the only two teams where I would say if you want to compare or describe the Princeton offense on steroids, it was those two teams. NC State and Georgetown. Those were the two teams that ran it at a level that I'm like, how are you getting these players to run this offense? And how do you guard it? It's incredible. Have you ever seen Nebraska Wesleyan run the Princeton offense? They're a Division III college in Nebraska. They do an excellent job in their conference and in their league on their schedule. I don't know what they average 80, 85 points a game sometimes running the Princeton offense. Relative to who they are, I should say who they are, and relative to the opponents they're playing, they are more talented. Right? And they run the Princeton offense at an up-tempo clip. Right? And they score. All right? Do you watch Richmond? Now, I will argue while Richmond runs the offense at a fast pace to get the ball up the floor, they have athletes, they have very skilled players. I still don't think Richmond is the most athletic team or the most talented team year after year after year in the A-10. They're going up against Dayton and Xavier and down the list. But the way that they run the Princeton offense is very, very up-tempo, right? Relative or comparative to the way that we're used to seeing the Princeton offense. Okay. So you can run this offense to slow the game down, and you can use this offense to speed the game up. All right. And the deciding factor of that is what players do you have and what players are you competing against? All right. Those are the two factors. Okay. Now, when we get into the exercise, and maybe by day 3, we'll talk about this a little bit more. We'll try to talk about it a little bit tomorrow. But you don't have to go all in on one or the other. Hey, we have to slow it down to a crawl, or we have to speed it up and go ludicrous speed. As a slide that I put in a presentation before, you don't have to run it as fast as you can run it. You don't have to run it. You can find this kind of middle area, and there are little tricks and little things that we can add and take away, where we can add some simple things in X's and O's wise. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. Where we can actually, I think at the very end of this, I'm going to kind of hint at it a little bit. But we can add things to slow the offense down. We can take things away to speed the offense up. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But I want you to understand that it is absolutely very, very possible, and that teams can obviously run this offense to slow the game down so that you can compete against teams that want to speed the game up. You can absolutely run this offense to speed the game up when you're the more talented, more skilled team, when other teams would rather slow it down and not get in that foot race. Okay, so you can make the adjustments depending on your situation. And like I said, I had a lot of coaches say, hey, we want to play fast. We want to play fast. We want to play fast. I was like, you can run Princeton fast. And I always want to put out there, all right, is playing fast going to help you win the most games on your schedule or the most important game on your schedule? Okay, and will you leave some flexibility in your strategy, and then in the X's and O's, to be able to speed it up or slow it down when you need to? Will you be able to pull your players back a little bit? Will you be able to push your players to go a little bit harder, to run a little bit faster, and still under control? Okay, so that's all what's possible with the Princeton offense. So does anyone have any questions now on strategy? All right, so we talked about competitive evaluation, and we talked about strategy. And I did see a question pop up. Coach Gabe, so he said, do you adjust which plays you will run based on competition, or are you just running the whole system? So, great question. I say, that question kind of leads me into the next thing, is actually the tactical planning, right? What X's and O's are we going to run to match this strategy? All right, so we have a strategy of playing fast, playing slow, playing physical, playing space. Which series do we run? Right? What part of the Princeton offense do we run, or do we run the whole thing as a system? And again, that's perfect because it's exactly what we're going to. It's going to depend. The X's and O's you choose, all right, are one, going to be very dependent on the personnel you have. So the strength of your best player or best group of players, and then it's also going to be determined by your team as a whole. So I don't recommend high school teams run everything anymore. When I was a head coach, my first year, I wanted to run everything. We ran low post, we ran point, we ran open, and we ran the chin series. We put all 4 of them in over the course of that first year, and it was way too much. We did so much more in practice than we ever ran in a game. Okay, but I'm gonna get into that one here as we go through. Okay, so no questions on strategy. All right, we're getting into tactical planning. Coach, I think we're going to be able to wrap this up in about 20 minutes or so, maybe 30. We'll do a big Q&A at the end. The Princeton offense, there are 4 core series that make up the Princeton offense. When I was learning the offense, again, in 2002, 2003, 2004, that was when I was first introduced to it. And we had a playbook of about like 5 different plays, 6, maybe, no, it might've been 7, 8 pages. I'm trying to have Coach Brenning, I'm asking him, hey, can you find that playbook? Because I can't find it. We got it from Jim Foster, who was running Princeton with the women at Vanderbilt. And we used to run it as set plays. And after I took that and then I started watching Princeton film, Air Force film, Northwestern film. Those were the 3 teams that I started watching. And then John Thompson, once I started to get a good hang on it, John Thompson went to Georgetown, started watching them. And then Chris Mooney went to Richmond. I've been watching Chris Mooney at Richmond since 04, 05 when he was hired there. But when you learned the game back then, there was so little to find. I mean, finding Air Force on TV was incredibly hard. Might be able to get 2-3 games a year. I think at one point I had to subscribe to the Mountain West. They had like their own thing. I had to pay, before you had digital TV, you had to, watch the game on computers. You couldn't watch it on TV. It was very hard to find. Princeton on national television never happened. So I watched a lot of Northwestern and then a lot of Georgetown and a little bit of Richmond when it was happening. But those are the only teams I could watch. The cool thing is the coaches of all of those teams, Bill Carmody, Joe Scott, Chris Moody, John Thompson III, those are the core guys. Those guys all played for Pete Carril and coached with Pete Carril at Princeton. So they all had a similar philosophy and a similar style, and they were all running a lot of the exact same stuff. And this is kind of where I go back to the core stuff. When the problem of learning the offense back then was lack of information, but but everything you found was good information. The problem with learning the offense today is there is a lot of information, which is great, but there's also a lot of bad information, or what I say when I watch a lot of YouTube videos breaking down Princeton, most of what it is, I want to say 98% of what other coaches do on YouTube breaking down the Princeton offense is just narrating the action that you see in front of your face. That's what most of the breakdowns that I see do. I find a lot of value in when you can find them explaining why they're doing what they're doing. Right? We can all see the X's and O's, but why? How did they get there? Why did they throw the ball there, and why are they screening this way now? What led to them making that decision? That's the hard thing. And with the amount of teams that are running Princeton today, and not only that, is everyone is getting so creative. Even the OG guys, Joe Scott back at Air Force again, Chris Mooney. These guys they're also getting so creative and trying to stay ahead of the curve. Excuse me. And there's no core thing you can come to. So when you're learning the Princeton offense, and coach will say, hey, well, these are the 10 things that make up the Princeton offense, or here's the 2 things, or here's the 7. There are 4 core series I basically tell coaches who are new, the Princeton offense, it's pretty much like 4 offenses rolled into one. 4 individual offense that all fit together into one. That's the Princeton offense. So there are 4 core series. You have the low post series, you have the chin series, you have the point series, and you have the open series. There is one more, but I don't talk about that one too often because it's a lot more involved. But I call that the flash series or the up series, or you can call it the pinch series. And then what the Princeton guys, they call it center forward. That's what they call it. I try to simplify even to what they do with some of their terminology. But the core 4, this is what you need to know. These are the 4 ones that you need to focus on: low post, chin, point, and open. Okay, now, what series you choose to run with your players does not determine the strategy. Okay, you can run low post, up tempo, or you can run a low post, slow and methodical and deliberate. You can run low post in space, right, by making some modifications, some adjustments. You can run the low post very physical, all right? Just pound it down in the low post. Get it there. Get it down the low post and play the game out of the low post. The chin series the same way. You can run it in an up-tempo way. You can make some adjustments. You can run it slow. You can space it out by making some adjustments. You can actually run the chin series and make the game more physical. Same thing with the point series. Same thing with the open series. And then Gabe, I'm going to kind of get to your question here in a little bit. All right. So when you're actually learning the offense themselves, these are the tactics. All right. If I go back to this previous page, so these are the tactics. Strategy and tactics are 2 different things. All right. Strategy is the overall plan. The tactics are the X's and O's. All right. And the offense and the X's and O's that carry out the plan. Strategy is the plan. All right. The tactics are the details that carry out the plan. All right. We want to play fast, right? But it's the X's and O's and how we design the X's and O's that carry out the strategy. Okay, it's very important to understand that distinction. All right, the X's and O's are only tools for the players to collectively express their skills on the court. All right, I came up. That's me. I'm gonna put my name on that. I've never heard that before. I'm trying to find out, how do you explain that? I'm like, that's great. All right, the X's and O's are only tools for the players to collectively express their skills on the court. I should say, together. The way that they play together are going to be, the X's and O's are going to be the tools they use. So the skills that they have, dribbling, passing, shooting, great. The X's and O's are now that's the hammer you're going to put in their hand. That's the drill you're going to put in their hand so that they can actually go perform the task that's going to get the job done, which is the strategy. All right. So to change up, to take the low post series or the chin series or the point series or the open series, all right, in order to take each of those series and execute a different strategy with them. So whether you want to run up tempo, you want to speed the game up, slow the game down, make the game more physical, play the game in more space, right? What we add to, take away from, and emphasize is going to determine how each of these series is used, right? And I threw out a list of 7, right? Something that we emphasize, and what I tell you what, this is really kind of a topic for day 3. We talk about installation, but your players will do 2 things, right? They will do something that you emphasize, that you tell them over and over and over and over again. When you emphasize something, right, that's something you're trying to get through their head. And when I'm coaching my players, I will say the same thing verbally over and over. And I actually say it. So the way that we coach it, when we're running the offense, I'm saying, hey, catch and rip. Hey, fake a pass to make a pass. Rip through, drive middle, drive the elbow, drive the elbow, drive the elbow. All right, that is emphasis. I want them to drive a certain place. So I'm saying drive the elbow. I don't say dribble at. Or I don't say, dribble at your teammate. I'm not saying that because we don't want them to do that. I want them to drive the elbow. Be a player. Be a player. If I'm working with a shooter, elbow in, elbow in. That's emphasis. What you emphasize is something that you eventually want their internal thoughts to be like just taking over. All right. So that's one thing. But if you emphasize structure versus freedom and the roles of the players. So if you emphasize running the offense, your players are going to run the offense. If you emphasize freedom in the offense, all right, without discipline, it's going to look like anything else. It's going to look like it's going to look like no pre-planned offense at all. Okay, so what you emphasize is what they're going to do. So if you want to emphasize structure, all right, then you play through the structure of the offense. If you want to emphasize freedom, okay, this would be a situation where you need to have the structure in place, but then you need to emphasize, hey, this is where we can break away. Hey, I know here you can go do this, but maybe we make some adjustments where we're gonna run the structure to a certain point, and then we're gonna come here and set this ball screen, and then we're gonna let you go play. Okay, so the way that you emphasize the offense, or I should say series at this point, because we're talking about these 4 series, but the way you emphasize it is the way that they're gonna run it. They're gonna run it more structured, more deliberate. All right, more with more freedom. All right, where you can again, coach your talent can go do what talent does, go make plays. Your playmakers can go make plays. All right. The second way, all right, is there is a what the announcers will call, and maybe other coaches do as well. But when I was first watching this, I would hear the announcers on TV. Doug Gottlieb would cover a lot of Air Force games back in the early 2000s. They run this false motion. And they were talking Jeff Bezdell. So Joe Scott came into the Air Force Academy, and I think 2001, and he coached there for 3 or 4 years, and then Chris Mooney. Then Joe Scott went to Princeton. Chris Mooney took over for 1 year. Then Chris Mooney went to Richmond. After Chris Mooney, there was Jeff Bezdell. Now, when Jeff Bezdell took over, Joe Scott had a dream team recruiting class. That the Air Force Academy actually at one point, maybe 06, 07, was top 7 or 8 in the country. Right? They were on such a hot streak. But what the conversations between the announcers and the coaches would say, they would say, hey, we took out a lot of the announcers would say they took out a lot of the false motion that Joe Scott and Chris Mooney would run at Air Force, and that sped the offense up. Now, those players that they had that were juniors and seniors those 2 years that Bezdelic was there, and Jeff Bezdelic was a Pat Riley guy, and credit to Bezdelic, he kept the offense there. They took away what they said the false motion. I call it strategic motion because it strategically helps you enter the offense different ways. It strategically moves players around to get them off different types of screens, or it strategically moves defenders around in certain areas. So now I've got a certain defender guarding a certain action or a certain player in a certain spot. So whatever you want to call it, false motion, I call it strategic motion. This is what coaches refer to like the forwards out or the invert or the exchange. When coaches would call that, if you add that in, you can slow down your offense. If you take it away, you can get right to the meat of the offense. And that's what Air Force did after Mooney left to Richmond, is they took out a lot of that false motion and they just got the offense quicker. And if they got the offense quicker, they got to the scoring actions quicker. Okay, but the important thing to learn, that wasn't a decision necessarily because Joe Scott and Chris Mooney left and Jeff Bezdelic, NBA guy, came in. The reason for that decision was, hey, we've got these players who were on really, really good teams as freshmen and sophomores. And they have 5 guys that are shooting 41% or higher from 3. And they are really talented. Let's give them some more, let's let them play a little faster and score a little higher clip because they have the talent to do it. All right. I would almost be certain that if Joe Scott stayed and coached that same group, he would probably do the same thing. He'd probably give them a lot more freedom because, man, they were good. In my mind, probably one of the best teams that ever run the Princeton offense was those Air Force teams. There is a delay motion that you can have in your coaching toolbox. All right. It could be in the playbook. There's delay motion that is specifically designed to delay, to take time off the shot clock, to take time off the clock period. If you have a shot clock or if you don't have a shot clock, it's also used to relieve pressure when teams are pressuring you man to man, or maybe it's to draw them away from. It can also be used to draw them away from the basket. So it's just not all delay. There's lots of reasons that you can run these actions, what we call a circle or a hook. But if you add that in, you can slow the game down. If that's something that's you've seen run a lot, if you take that away, you can speed the game up. All right. There are different entries and counter entries to the offense. If you're only looking at one entry and the defense starts taking that away, and now you start to V cut or down screen or do stuff like that to get open, all right, it can slow the game down. It can slow your offense down. It could really kind of bog things up a little bit. But if you, there are, for example, like with the low post series, there are probably 5 or 6 different ways to enter that offense, not including the false motion above that we just talked about. So there's multiple different ways you can actually enter the low post series so that, hey, if this isn't open, boom, I can cross over and I can make a call and we can audible out is what we would say, or we can counter the defensive pressure, or we can audible out, let the players make a decision, and then they could go run the same series on the other side of the court. Or but there's multiple different entries and counters, and some entries can speed the offense up. Some entries and counters can slow the offense down. Some entries and counters can put you in position to make the game more physical. Some ways that you enter and counter-enter in the offense can actually space the court out. So you can, all of these decisions are going to, before we even get into the actual X's and O's, the actual core series, are going to have an effect on if this offense is run fast or run slow. All right, the core series themselves, if you run the offense, if you run the core series, the way that they were, I shouldn't say the way that they were designed. I'm going to say the way that they were designed. And this is my way of simplifying the Princeton offense, the way that other coaches have run it in the past. Because I'm not an insider. I'm like an outsider that just got hooked and got addicted to this offense and just went all in on it. And I went down the rabbit hole. I went down every rabbit hole. But I took a first principles approach to this offense so that I could understand it myself. Okay, and if you run it in that core way, in the core series, and actually I say you run the core series the core way at that fundamental foundational level. And if you're hitting every scoring action, you can run the offense at a slower pace. If you're running the core series and you're only trying to get to 1 or 2 of the scoring actions, and you're like, okay, I know we can score this way, but we don't have the personnel to score this way in the series, so we're going to skip that. We're just going to get to the next scoring action in the series. That's a way to speed the offense up. All right. Number 6, you can modify each series. This is where we start to get creative. All right, you can run modifications. We can modify the low post series. We can modify the chin series. We can modify the point series. We can modify the open series. We can do that based on the personnel you have and the strategy and the style and the tempo and the pace that you want to play. All right, you can do things in the point series to slow that offense down. You can run the point series in a way that you can take the offense down to a crawl. All right, most coaches want to run the point series because that's where you get to all the ball screens. That's the one series that really emphasizes the ball screens. Everyone's really into the split actions, but you can modify it, right? Or you can run what we call wrinkles. We can add wrinkles, which are basically quick hitters disguised within the core series or the modified series that will can speed the game up, slow the game down, right? Or make the game more physical, right? Or spread the game out so you can play in more space, right? And the last way that we can affect strategy is by running hybrid versions of the Princeton offense. Okay, this is something that I've leaned in heavily the last 2-3 years, and we've done this on the court. Pretty much every chance I get on the court, coach is like, "Well, how would you run Princeton with this off?" And a lot of coaches might even start saying, "What is a hybrid Princeton?" And to me, I look at hybrid in a way like, "Hey, you could be like a John Beeline at West Virginia and at Michigan, where everyone say he runs a hybrid Princeton." It's like John Beeline's one of those unique guys that's just creativity through the roof, right? He's coming up with stuff that, he goes to sleep, has a dream, wakes up in the middle of the night, writes something down, and then puts it in where it's like, there are some coaches like that. All right. And then other coaches, maybe like me, my creativity comes through my experience anymore. But I need to see a core way to run this, and then, so if I get the Princeton offense, and what I would like to do is I would like to take another offense that is already legit, that is already proven, that is already solid. Say, I want to run the Princeton offense because I want to slow the game down in some certain circumstances, but I want to put the dribble drive offense in so I can speed the game up in some circumstances. And maybe I want to run Princeton to slow it down, and I want the dribble drive to space it out. Okay, what I did was I found a way to run the Princeton offense with the dribble drive offense, and I actually did this when I was a head coach. I wanted my players were when they became juniors and seniors, they were all guards. We had one traditional big. We had 7 kids that could run the point guard spot, and they wanted to play fast, but I still wanted to have a little bit of control. This is year 3, so I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to put in something out of transition. We're going to call it dribble drive, and out of transition, we would let them run dribble drive. And they would run it one cycle through, and then I found the best spot to switch it over. Okay, now once dribble drives finishes, we're going to get right into our Princeton. So that way I had this balance of, hey, giving them a little bit of freedom, letting them play a little bit faster than what we had been playing the previous 2 years because we were better. That third year was the best team that I had. So I let them play a little bit more. All right, and then when I wanted to bring them back in, we would go right back into our Princeton. So running a hybrid version of the Princeton offense would be a way to speed the game up, or even slow the game down, right? Some coaches will say, hey, coach, how do you run the Princeton offense with 2 post players? I was like, well, something I like to do sometimes is, or we've worked on is running the Princeton offense with the triangle offense. In the triangle offense, you can have a ball side post and a pinch post. And at another school as an assistant, we put in the triangle offense because we had 2 guys that were both going to play on the blocks, but I didn't want them both playing traditional on the blocks, because when they did that, the game got too tight. Okay, so we played more triangle. So hey, we went mid post here, and then short post on the other side. So Coach Clutch, so how do you establish which series you want to get into during the flow of a game versus pregame? That's probably going to be a good question for tomorrow after we go through the X's and O's. But basically, what happens is so right now we're still choosing what offense we're going to run. And then there's 2 different ways to look at it. Save that question for me tomorrow. Come right back with me with that one tomorrow. It's going to be a better time to answer that one because it's kind of out of the scope of where we're at right now. But it is a very good and very important question. As a matter of fact, I'm going to screenshot that right now, and I will work it into tomorrow's slides. All right. So all that said, do you guys have any questions? And I tell you, I wasn't sure if that was going to be the last slide or not, because that was the last slide. So how do you establish what series you're going to run in a game during the flow of a game, or versus maybe like pregame? So there's two approaches to this, and myself, what I would do, and you have to keep this in mind. Once you guys start going down this rabbit hole, especially for you new coaches, is there is going to be, I've had so many coaches just like they learn the Princeton offense, learn of the Princeton offense, they learn of all the stuff you can do with it, fall madly in love with it. And then what happens is we want to do everything. We want to put everything in. We want to do this. We want to do this. That was me. That's absolutely what I did too. And one thing you have to be careful of when you're deciding what offense, what X's and O's you're going to run. So hopefully, so the homework today. So everyone's got a little bit of homework. I want you guys to come and let me know in the chat tomorrow. Homework today. What strategy are you going to implement? All right. Look at your personnel. All right. The players on your team. Look at the players. And sometimes you can take this a little bit deeper. Sometimes it's like, hey, we're rebuilding. It's like we have to play a certain way with the personnel we have now, but also looking forward to 2-3 years from now, that's going to change a little bit, which is fine. But what strategy are you going to implement to be able to beat with the best teams on your schedule? The teams that are 20 points better than you. If there's teams that are 40, 50 points better than you, all right, just put some off to the side. But teams that are 20, 25 points better than you on paper, what strategy are you going to implement? Are you going to play? Do you want to play fast? Do you want to play slow? Do you want to play physical? Do you want to play in more space? Okay. And I'll say also, do you want to, there's going to be middle ground. You don't have to like go all in. Hey, we got to play fast. We got to play slow. You can find this middle area. Okay. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as well this week is, we want to play at this one level so I can speed it up a little bit, slow it down a little bit. It's like going on those big, like, hey, we're going to speed it up a lot or slow it down a lot. Those exaggerated things are going to be for special occasions. So homework tonight is what strategy do you want to implement with the Princeton offense, with these 4 series that we're going to go over tomorrow? How do you want to play? All right, not what X's and O's, but how do you want to play? Fast, slow, physical, and space, or do you want to blend a couple of the two? All right. So going back to King Clutch's question, in the flow of the game. So once you decide what you're going to run, what I would do is I would give to start the game off, just so my players did not have to think. I would say, hey, I want to come down. I want to run low post. I want forwards out opposite guys. Let's get into low post. If you don't get anything out of that, all right, get into all of our counters. Get into our 1-time, 2-time. Get into our point. Get into our point opposite. Get into our But let's go low post first, or let's go point screen away first. First 2 possessions. Let's see what that sets up, and then you guys got it after that. You can do it that way. I also talk about advanced game planning, which we might talk about day 3, where I'll say we'll actually have it scripted out a little bit. Hey, first 4 minutes of the first quarter, we're going low post first. Now, it's not the only thing we're going to run, but it's like, hey, we're going to start running low post, because our offense flows from one thing to another. And if that's your question, how do you flow from one thing to another? We're going to talk about that in another video. That's going to go quite a bit. But you can. I think the point I want to make with that question, Coach, is when you're deciding what to run, the most important thing is not what they're going to do in the game. It's that menu. If you go to the Cheesecake Factory, it takes 20 minutes to read the menu, and then it takes 20 more minutes to decide what you want to eat. But if you go through Cane's Chicken, it's like, how many pieces do you want? 4, 5, or 6. That's box 4, 5, or 6, and that's it. You have 3 options. So that's another thing that I want you to keep in mind. But I think that's a question that we're going to get into more as we go through this. So, Coach Chivington, can this be effective for a scoring point guard? Absolutely. There are modifications. We've done this summer. So again, I've worked out with a team in Indiana, 2 teams in Michigan, a team in New York, 2 different teams in Pennsylvania. I worked out with a collegiate men's program during our clinic in the spring, and a lot of problems. Coach running say, but I've got one player that's really good as my point guard. But we want to run low post, Coach, but I don't like the fact of throwing the ball to the wing and my point guard cutting away like the core, like you do in the core series of low post. So what we would do is we would make modifications for that player. is, hey, we're going to run low post and we'll do something called screen the point. So our point guard throws the ball to the wing. They go screen away. Instead of cutting to the corner and getting out of the offense, and it takes 3-4 passes for the point guard to get the ball back, we're modifying the offense or the low post series in this example so that as soon as he makes the pass, he's going to go screen away for another player. They're going to go curl or go backdoor, and then that point guard's going to screen, pop right back up. On the very next pass, they're getting the ball. And then we get into the next scoring action where he is actually a lot more involved. So we want a lot of times you're going to have, hey, we've got one player. Can we run the Princeton offense? You can, absolutely. We'll modify it in a way so that the ball is getting into that player's hands more and more often. Does not mean that player has to be the one scoring, but they're the ones going to be making most of the decisions. Okay, so you can absolutely modify the offense step by step all the way through that. Then as you develop all of your other players through the year, because we'll still practice in a way where everyone's getting those reps, as your other players get better, you can start to loosen up the reins a little bit and let other players take on those decision-making roles. So Coach White, how do you run Princeton offense when they switch to zone? Great question. So in my experience, it's going to be a little different from everyone. And here's one of the things you have to be prepared for is if you get really, really good at running the Princeton offense, you're going to see zone, especially at the high school level. They're like, man, coach, you're like, man, I don't want to guard this stuff. Coach will be like, man, we cannot guard this stuff. And you're going to have one of those two mindsets. So, well, the first thing that I tell my players when they switch to zone, say, look, when these guys go zone, they are afraid of you, and they do not want to guard. They do not want to play. They don't want to guard you. They're afraid of you. So they're going to their backup defense, which is their zone. Now in my situation, 95% of the teams I saw every year played us man-to-man. It was just, 2000. My head coaching career was 08 through 2012. And even the 7 years before that and the 3 years after that was predominantly everyone was playing everyone man-to-man. After COVID, I know there's a lot more teams that are playing zone. I think we're starting to get back to normal a little bit. But if I'm seeing 90% man and 10% zone, I'm going to work 90% on my man-to-man offense and 10% on my zone. So my zone philosophy is if I'm only going to see zone 10% of the time, I'm going to keep my zone simple and effective. And because you understand there are multiple zone defenses that you might see a 2-3, you might see a 1-2-2, you might see a 1-3-1 on other nights, you might see a 3-2 on some nights. You're going to see different types of zone defenses in the half court. Excuse me. And so what I didn't want to do is install, and I'm only going to see that maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20% of the time you might see zone. I don't want to take away time from our bread and butter on picking like 4 set plays for a 2-3 and then 4 set plays to run against a 1-3-1 and then 3 set plays to run against a 1-2-2 because every zone defense is different. So we ran what I call now just a one zone offense. We ran a 3 around 2, short corner, high post, the same crossing offense that everyone does, but we run it against every zone defense. And we get the ball to the short corner of the corner. We turn every zone defense into a 2-3 zone. And then once we see that, we know how to pick it apart. Once we know how to turn every zone into a 2-3, we know how to reverse the ball, swing it back around. We never let them set back up in a 1-3-1 again. We never let them set back up in a 1-2-2 again once we get the ball to the short corner. And what happened for us, fortunately, is a lot of times when teams went zone against us, our players learned how to play so well through learning the game through a Princeton offense lens, through a Princeton lens, that they were able to understand the game a lot better than I ever was able to as a player. And again, that's a clutch of mine. I was slow to the game, as I talked about early on. I was slow to the game as a player. I was slow learning the game as a coach. So the way I coach is really understanding is like right at the forefront. But we were able to start to pick teams apart a lot. And again, I had a couple quick hitters for a 2-3 if we needed a 3 or if we needed something down around the rim. But we would run one zone offense for everything. That way, it was just very simple, and we kind of we gave our players some freedom in that zone offense. But we got to hit the spot here, we got to hit the spot here, and when the ball comes out, we are either attacking or reversing the ball and getting it back down to the opposite short corner, so that defense can never set back up again the way they want to. So that's what I would do against zones. Another thing we did against zones, because sometimes teams will start to switch it up against us, and our players would get such a mindset of, hey, we're running our man-to-man offense. They would start running their man-to-man offense and not even recognize they were running at such a habit or such a reflexive level. They were running their man-to-man against a 2-3 zone, having no idea that the team's running a 2-3 zone. So we yell zone from the half court. Eventually, and they couldn't pick that up. Eventually, I would just say forwards out. And then they would exchange, and then they would look, oh, they're not following us. They're in zone, and then they would get right in their zone offense. So that's my initial approach. If you're seeing teams that are zoning you half the time, you're going to have more time to put in a more intricate zone offenses versus what you see. So I think that kind of goes individually with everyone, but that's kind of my surface level approach, Coach. Hope that helps. Coach Kawhi, so what would it look like to play physical and in space through the Princeton offense? So physical, if you want to play the game physical, what I would do is we teach all of our players to post up. We teach our bigs obviously post up, but I teach every single guard in our offense to post up. And so here's one of the knocks that the coaches get with Princeton offense, or that I hear. It's like, Coach, well, I don't have players that can shoot, so we can't run Princeton. Okay, well, it's not going to make your dribble drive any. If you can't shoot, dribble drive is going to be awful tough too, because we're just going to switch and pack, get in on dribble drive. If you can't shoot in anything, it's going to you're going to have a struggle. You're going to have the same struggles in every single offense you run. It doesn't matter. You're going to have the same problems. You can't shoot. Okay, but how many coaches teach their guards how to post up? All right, and I want 5 threats on the court. That doesn't mean all 5 guys get to shoot the basketball. All right, but if I got one kid that because I've taught this skill of how to score in the post, if I put that player in the post, all right, that's making the game more physical. One, because now we're around the rim. Okay, so I turn all of our guards into post players. Multiple reasons for that is, one, other guards don't know how to guard in the post. 2, if you can't shoot, you better be able to make a layup. 3, if you can get down there and we practice it a lot, and if you can learn how to get fouled in the low post, well, now you can go to the free throw line and be a threat. All right, if you can get in the low post, you can also bring the defense in. Once the ball's in the low post, whether it's a guard or a big, the defense usually collapses. Now I can kick it back out for a higher percentage shot. Okay, so to make the game more physical, I like to post everybody up. That's my first attack at. This is how we're going to make this game more physical. Is we're going to throw the ball into our post player. We're going to throw the ball to every guard into the low post. All right, and we're gonna work down there, and we're gonna try to get to the free throw line, try to get and ones, try to make that defense collapse. That's how we would make the game more physical. When I say more physical, we're trying to bring the it's kind of also in a way of trying to bring the defense to the rim. Okay, but the way that I would make it more physical is by posting everybody up, posting all of our guards up, which we do. Now, we'll teach everyone the skill, but maybe in a game you're like, hey, only tonight this kid's posting up. And maybe you're not comfortable yet. Maybe it takes some time. But eventually, I had one player that couldn't shoot, couldn't drive. He was a dog on defense though. Kid got after it defensively. But the only place on offense he could be a threat, he would go back door and then he would post up and he would slide in there. I mean, like, it was so awkward sometimes, but he would get fouled all the time. And you'll find role players will find roles in the low post and in places on the court where they can be a threat. How do we modify it to play in more space? We'll stand in certain positions. Instead of standing on the 3-point line, we'll stand 5 feet off the 3-point line. We'll start the offense. We'll start 10 feet off the 3-point line. We'll add maybe a couple different entries or a delay option in where we're bringing our 5-man out from the low post to the perimeter. All right, like maybe the open series, for example. If you run Princeton's open series, it's kind of like everyone else's 5 out, except I will show you tomorrow how to tell when someone's 5 out is Princeton or when someone's 5 out is something else. So that you can actually, when you see it, know, oh, that's influenced by Princeton. Oh, so you'll see that tomorrow as well. But taking your 5-man out of the low post will space the game out. Taking your 5-man out of the low post, putting them on the elbow will space the game out. Taking your guards that are standing on the 3-point line and get them to stand on the NBA 3-point line. That will space the game out. Teaching your guards how to shoot threes, that'll space the game out. If you got good shooters, that's naturally going to space the game out. So those are a couple strategies that we would try to implement to do that. So Coach Clutch, so that is your question. Looking forward to awesome. Coach Collins, great stuff already. Will this session replays expire? If so, need to go back in and take notes ASAP. Replays, I'm going to leave these replays up at least through Sunday night. At least through Sunday night. I'll leave all these replays up. Yep. Okay. Very cool. All right. No more questions. So we got out of here in 95 minutes, hour and a half. Tomorrow, bank on going a little bit longer tomorrow because tomorrow it's going to be most of the work's going to be on the board, getting into the X's and O's. Again, just so everyone's kind of aware, when I do coaching clinics like on the court, I spend 12 to 14 hours on the court over 2 or 3 days. Me alone teaching everything that I can possibly teach on Princeton. And that's on the court, 14 hours. And at the end of that, I always wish that I had 2 more hours. Man, I want to show you this, and I want to show you this. So understand that we're going to get to about 5-6 hours through the next 3 days. There is a lot that I'm not going to be able to go through in this 3-day event alone. Just understand that. I want to really make sure that we set a great foundation so that especially for the coaches that are new, know what we can do with the Princeton offense. And the coaches that have been running it, like, hey, let's not get too wild and crazy with this stuff. We need to sometimes hammer on the stuff that works, and find the right stuff that's going to work for you and your situation, for your players and for your opponents, for your competitive situation. All right. So I will certainly, at the end of each session, try to answer as many questions as I can. But we're really going to set a good foundation. I'm really, really excited. Had great attendance, had over 400 coaches sign up for this, about 60 coaches on average throughout the whole time. So really excited. And tomorrow we are going to start again sharp at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same bat time, same bat channel. The link that took you, if you're watching this on the actual Princeton Offense Masterclass page, that link will be the same. But if some of you are watching this on YouTube, there will be a new link for YouTube. So if you're watching this and you did not sign up, if you actually did not register, all right, there's something kind of cool for you there. Go to PrincetonOffenseMasterclass.com and you guys can sign up there. If you haven't signed, because this is actually publicly running on YouTube as well, you can always go over there and sign up and then get on the email list and you can get emails from me as well. So if you didn't sign up for this and if you don't receive my emails, go to PrincetonOffenseMasterclass.com, sign up over there so I can at least email you all this information. All right, Coach, thanks a lot. I will see you guys tomorrow. All right, tomorrow, X's and O day. Tomorrow's X and O day. All right, see you, Coach.